Welcome back, fans, to the Cheap Heat Productions Podcast Network. My name is Jack Kilby, No Gimmicks Guy on the socials. And I've got a very special guest today, a really interesting guest in so much as he was the very first inaugural editor of the World Wrestling Federation magazine, the WWF magazine, during a really pivotal time into national expansion. From there, he moved on to merchandising and marketing, and so much to talk about there given his tenure. I would be speaking about none other than Ed Helsinki. Ed, welcome to the show tonight, sir.
Jack, thank you so much. It's an honor. It's a pleasure, and you are the No Gimmicks Guy. And a big shout out to my people in Ireland.
Excellent. We are Ireland's top pro wrestling YouTube channel, thanks to all the support of the folks over in the Emerald Isle. I guess the logical place to start would be going back to your early days as a sports reporter in New York State. And also, before we went on air, you shared that growing up, you had a passion for professional wrestling, but want to link that all to what led you to Titan Sports.
Wow. Couple of different things. I grew up in Western New York, just outside of Buffalo, between Buffalo and Niagara Falls. And it was a very fortunate place to be in terms of pro wrestling. We had Maple Leaf Wrestling from Toronto. We had CHCH TV 11 out of Hamilton that we could watch pro wrestling. And we used to watch wrestling from the Odd Memorial Auditorium in Buffalo. And I used to watch that as a little boy with my dad. And of course, doing things with your dad was always very, very special. But we both got the biggest kick out of pro wrestling. And over the years, I became a sports writer at age 15. I was writing sports for the local newspaper there and got pretty good at it. After I graduated from high school in 1975, I took a year. I went to junior college nearby and was a beat reporter for the Buffalo Norsemen of the North American Hockey League, and that was the basis of the movie Slapshot. Mm-hmm. So I got to meet Paul Newman and the cast of characters and the Hanson brothers, and saw how that happy band of misfits in the North American Hockey League translated to the movie Slapshot. And then down the road, I took a job in Auburn, New York here as an assistant sports writer. And lo and behold, 5 months after I came here, a pro wrestling show, the World Wrestling Federation, was doing one of their small house shows at the local community college here. So that perked my ears up right away. And I called and I spoke to a guy named Ed Cohen, who was the big booking agent for the World Wrestling Federation at that point. The business was located on Cape Cod. I talked my way into getting credentials, and in exchange of getting credentials, I promised what we had done, what we were going to do for the newspaper, we would share with them. So the show came in on a Thursday night. It was a packed house. Friday morning's paper, I did a retrospect about pro wrestling, talking about guys like Sweet Daddy Siki and Tex McKenzie, and now we have Sweet Hansen and Sergeant Slaughter and Ivan Putski, and it was quite the card in Auburn for a small college show. And then the following, a couple days later, our newspaper, back then newspapers did picture pages when they couldn't sell the advertising for the entire newspaper. So Steve Taylor did this magnificent picture page, and wow, it was just mind blowing. So I kept my word, and that Sunday afternoon, I mailed out all that information to Ed Cohen. And then 3 days later, he's calling me, asking me if Steve and I would like to fly down to the Cape. They're starting this new magazine, and we'll be interested in interviewing to be the editor and the photo editor of this magazine. And a week later, that went down. We were hired on the spot, negotiated our pay that same day, and by the time we got back off the plane in Syracuse later that day, we were shaking our heads saying, what the hell did we actually do? And Steve was married at the time. I was single at the time. It was a lot easier for me to move, but for Steve, that was a big decision that he needed to make, and he had to have his wife on board. So our first gig was the end of July 1983, and it was Madison Square Garden. Right out of the box, we're at the Mecca of pro wrestling.
Mhm.
And, I just remember getting backstage there, and you did a lot of watching, and you kept your mouth shut. And that took in a lot of listening and just absorbed everything. And the first person who grabbed me and became my mentor was Fred Blassie. Blassie, come here, kid. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you some things about the wrestling business. And so it was him and Professor Elliott, who used to be backstage at Madison Square Garden as well too. They smartened me up on a lot of things rather quickly about the business at that point. And at that point, then Vince was cutting off all the other pro wrestling medias at that point because he was going to create his own magazine, control his own product, and put it together with his TV production and getting the show on different markets. And that's how he was beginning to starting to take over the country, the United States, and then migrating into Canada, and then, trying to take on the world at that point.
When you did your interview, who was the individual or individuals that pitched it to you and ultimately extended you the job offer?
We were interviewed by a gentleman named Todd Dietrich, who was at that time living on the Cape and was working with the McMahons at that point. He didn't come to Greenwich with us or Stanford afterward. Todd was a independently multi-millionaire in the swimming pool business from the Albany, New York area, and was living on the Cape. And how he hooked up with the McMahons is beyond me. But it was Todd Dietrich, and then I remember interviewing with Linda McMahon, and I think we had a little brief meeting with Vince McMahon as well too. So I mean, we passed the acid test. It wasn't anything like it was 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 or 4-on-1. We can get some of those intimidating interviews, but they were more like smaller interviews that went on for a few hours. Wanted to see if we were going to be a good fit.
Got to ask you your first impressions and first sort of interaction with Mr. McMahon, because of the fact that was a period where he, the business wasn't exactly what it would grow into. Was he the larger than life bombastic personality that so many people have talked about in later years, or was he more down to earth depending on your interactions with him?
He was more down to earth, and at that point. But the reason why I say that is his father was there looking over. His father was bigger than life. His father was a very stoic man, jingling the quarters in his pocket. He was, the second generation of the McMahons in pro wrestling. So you paid a lot of respect and a lot of reverence to Vince Sr. Vince Jr., he was getting his feet wet. He was putting his plan into place. He had waited for his opportunity. Mind you, he was under the gun. He had bought the business. He had for $1 million, and he had 1 year to pay it back, or the business went back to his father. So there was a lot of pressure on something like that. And, box office was very, very important. However, the McMahon family always made it a point that make the prices affordable for families. Is that the case today? No. And I'm not knocking it. It's just the business model, what it is today. But they took a different approach to it and made it affordable for families. Now, this year, upstate New York, near the holiday time, Christmas and New Year's, they've got family-friendly wrestling coming to Syracuse and Rochester, New York, and Albany, New York. So they're sprinkling it in a little bit, but it's not like it used to be.
Are you talking about WWE house shows that are family-friendly or other?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they really cut back on those, didn't they?
They did, because they were doing everything was based for TV, and their business model is with the networks and the network money. So that changes the whole dynamics of everything at that point. Probably saving the boys as well too. Back then, the guys were working all kinds of different shows. We had a 3-tier system. We had the smaller shows like the high schools and the junior colleges. Then we had the medium markets like, say, Syracuse and Rochester and Albany and Hershey. And then we had the top markets like New York and Boston and Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Hartford. And guys were learning their craft. They were trying different angles. They were trying different finishes. So by the time, they did this in the smallest market, then the medium market, and they tried it in some bigger markets. And so by the time they got to New York City, they knew what finish they were going to do and what was going to draw the most money and what the most reaction was. The boys back then really were given an idea to develop their character, and it was upon them to develop their character at that point. There were no writers. I never wrote anything for a wrestler on how to act or how to behave. That's just the way it was, that they developed it on their own with the help of the road agents. I don't know how it works today. My understanding, they have writers that are, TV writers that are putting things together for characters. And some of them, are believable, and some of them are really hokey, in my opinion. Then again, I'm old school and I'm an old fart, so who knows?
Well, yeah, not only writers, but as we heard last week, they're starting to rely or use artificial intelligence heavily, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, I would agree, it's certainly better back then to give the talent that latitude. But again, a totally different business. You mentioned Classy Freddie Blassie, the legend that he is. What when you said he taught you the wrestling business, man, that would have been that could have been a series in and of itself, I'm sure. What are some of the highlights of your interactions with Fred?
Fred would point out things to me on how to generate heat, how to generate a crowd reaction. He shared stories with me about his wrestling career, how he was cut, stabbed, nearly shot, battery acid thrown at him. Fred was a great heel wherever he worked, whether on the West Coast or in St. Louis. He could draw money. He could draw heat. He had forgotten more about the business than a lot of people will ever know. And he was able to share some of that stuff with me as well, too. Why he took an interest in me is beyond me, but I'm always eternally grateful for Fred for doing something like that. I mean, I miss Fred. I know he's been gone 20 some odd years, but I remember him sitting in my office once, and I asked him, and I said, "Hey, Fred, are you really 65 years old?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm 65. He goes, "Why?" I said, you look more like you're fucking 85 years old. And he goes, "I'm gonna break your fucking neck." And so, I mean, it was that type of thing. You have to understand, I lost my father, and Fred became like a father figure to me. And so that was really important and near and endearing to me. So Fred Blassie will always be up here.
Yeah, agree with you there totally as well. When you first took on the role of the editor, and there was that controversy that I think a lot of the wrestling mags that were in existence, the so-called after mags and others, of course, there was a lot of resentment, right off the hop, that their access was being cut, and you could see their editorial spin, move away from WWF being, a great thing, and more towards Crockett and NWA. But when you first came on board, you mentioned it was it was part of Vince's grand plan. But what was the vision that was shared with you in terms of that publication and the role that it had? Because I remember the magazine fondly as a kid, used to really enhance enjoyment of the product. But what was the piece that the magazine was to fill in his big plan?
Couple things. We started off being, we were going to be a magazine to showcase WWF wrestlers. However, you could only go so far with what talent we had. I mean, we had some good talent, but we didn't have a lot of talent. And angles and feuds were, could end in a heartbeat. So we needed to get more talent. What I suggested as we go into different markets and take pictures, the premise was, let me call down to Dallas. And Fritz von Erich allowed us to come down there and shoot and do a story on his boys. We had no intention of raiding that market. However, the magazine became a tool that we could go into these other territories, take these photos, get messages to talent to contact Vince, and that's where we were starting to raid talent at that point, especially the AWA. I remember calling, and I was instructed, call Vern and get Steve in. And that's when we got the message to Hulk Hogan. Steve Taylor gets a lot of credit for it, and God bless him. But I'm the one who initiated the call to Vern. And Vern was highly skeptical with me. But I said, look, we're just going to come in and do, shoot some of the talent for our magazine. Now, that meeting, it was myself, Steve Taylor, Jim Troy, and Vince. And Vince gave me my marching orders, get Steve Taylor in. Ed, you're excused. I never heard the whole entire plan. Then Vince told Steve Taylor some additional information, and then Steve was excused. And then it was Jim Troy and Vince finishing this plot, for better lack of a better word to describe it, or a scheme or plan. So when Steve went to Chicago, Blackjack Lanza was following him like a hawk. He followed Steve into the John. I mean, Steve had to go to the bathroom, and Blackjack was right behind him. And somehow he shook Blackjack just for a moment, and he got near Hulk, and he handed Hulk a note, said, please call Vince at his house. And at that point, the story is, I've heard that Hulk was ready to do it anyways because Vern wasn't going to make him the AWA champion. This was right after the Rocky appearance, and Vince was entirely enamored with Hulk Hogan being in Rocky. Vince at that point was already thinking about mainstream, incorporating the movies, incorporating TV, making this thing bigger than life, and getting the word out there and the buzz out there. And it was happening. I mean, we brought Hulk in, and it was just insane at that point, And after Hulk came on, a lot of the other boys from AWA jumped as well too, because they were going to have better paydays, and they were going to be on TV, and they kind of liked the idea that, hey, let's go for the national takeover, and that's what was happening. I mean, Vince, my understanding, Vince went to a lot of the promoters, the old NWA stewardship, and said, hey, look, I'd like to buy you out. And when they wouldn't, Vince said, okay, I'll put you out of business. And he did. It was all based on television. And I remember Vince telling me, I'm going to make Hulk Hogan the first $1 million wrestler. And damn it, he did. And it just took off at that point. And then with the Hulkamania t-shirts and all the merchandising at that point, it just exploded. A television taping, we would put the first couple rows were full of WWF merchandise, and it was done with intention because it would pan into the crowd, and moms and dads and kids were seeing this stuff, and they had to have it. And then you would parlay it with the magazine and the magazine ad, and Vince would, do that. And my God, the next week money was flooding in with orders. People were buying the magazine, and people were, purchasing merchandise left and right.
That's that sounds very Machiavellian to go in under a different pretense and then slip a note. No wonder Vern had. Vern was perhaps the biggest victim of the national expansion. Was that a tactic that was used in other areas, or just primarily the AWA?
Well, the AWA at that point was considered, I'm going to say, probably behind Crockett and his wrestling at that point, but the AWA was probably the most vulnerable of the bigger organizations. Vern liked his wrestlers who had amateur backgrounds, and he wasn't necessarily into the styling and profiling of a Hulk Hogan, or the flashiness, or the Hollywood and box office and all that other stuff. The New York appearance. So, I mean, Vince embraced that wholeheartedly. We tried to get national advertisers on board, but they kind of looked at us and said, "Oh, you're only pro wrestling. You haven't earned your stripes yet." Now, today is a little bit different, but back then it was tough to draw national money. So everything was based on those house shows and mid-range markets and big shows. I mean, we were running 50, 60 shows a month. That's a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
On Saturdays, on some weekends, we would run a matinee show in one location. We did like a Hartford or a Springfield, Mass, matinee starting at noon or 1 o'clock, and then Madison Square Garden that night at 8 o'clock. And then we would do a place in Pennsylvania, and then we were in Pittsburgh. So, we had enough wrestlers that were doing 4 shows and bringing in all kinds of money at that point. So it was, boys were working. Boys were getting beat up as well, too. And, on the road for 21 days and off for 7, that takes a toll. People don't realize that these guys do take a beating in the ring. Throwing yourself all over the place does hurt. You land incorrectly, you've got a serious problem.
Absolutely. Walk us through a typical day in the WWF magazine offices during your tenure. What were the particular challenges you faced in terms of producing content? On I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but not the biggest budget in the world at that time, and on schedule, and then balancing trying to keep kayfabe alive as well in the magazine. It must have been a daunting process at times.
Here's the deal. I was a one-man show. I was doing the press releases for the shows going across for the month. So those needed to be done as well. I was doing a monthly program that were in the venues as well too. I think the print run on that was 30,000. So that would be like 16 pages to Steve was great with the photography. We had enough advertising. I didn't have to produce a lot of content. However, the content had to be accurate, projecting into the future. We didn't have a Ouija board. We didn't have a crystal ball. Things got changed all the time. And that became very frustrating sometimes, because Vince would come in and say, "Okay, this is no good. Here's what we're going to be doing. It has to be changed." And you have like a day and a half to get it to up to Boston to have it put together. Then we had the magazine on top of that. So we would have somewhere about 4 or 5 different stories that I'd have to write. I had Jeff Walton out of Los Angeles doing retrospect old pieces about LA wrestling and California wrestling back then. But that was just one story. So I had to produce a lot of different editorial content, and that got changed all the time. So it became very, very frustrating. Then it became an issue, and it came up that, I'm a newspaper reporter and I write like a newspaper reporter. I never said I'm a magazine editor and I write, like a magazine editor. And that became a point of contention. And that's why my shelf life was only so long with the magazine, because they wanted to go in a different direction. Mind you, it was only after they replaced me, they brought other people in. So I was doing the job of probably three, maybe four people at that point. And then they brought the design in house as well too. So that changed things. They cut the ad agency out of the picture, and that's just the way it is. I'm not spewing any sour grapes. I'm the most fortunate man on the face of the earth. I mean, people would kill to have been in my shoes and have that opportunity. So I look at it as this. I mean, uh, who hasn't been replaced by Vince McMahon? I mean, I had a shelf life, and unfortunately, you're the last one to find out what the shelf life is all about.
Yeah, I've heard that many, many times. What were some of the standout interviews that you did for the magazine of wrestlers? And do you have any interesting behind the scenes stories of guys either being receptive to you, or because it was very much a closed business there? Were there any ones that were particularly hostile, so to speak?
I will say this: 95% of the boys welcomed us in. They knew that this was something big. They knew we were there to do a job. They knew that we could. We earned their trust. We maintained kayfabe. There were a few skeptics. Chief Jay Strongbow, what an asshole! I mean, he was just a mean spirited man, but who probably ruined a lot of wrestlers' careers and would rat you out for nothing in a heartbeat. Um, Getting back to we, as opposed to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, where these writers sat in their office the whole time and concocted all these stories. I actually had a tape recorder and would go get these guys and have them go into character. We learned a lot and did a lot of storylines on what we did at television in Allentown and Hamburg, PA, because we were projecting 3, 4, 5 weeks in advance. So that helped us a little bit with the planning towards getting things done for the program and the magazine. It had to be the timing, because depending on when TV rolled, you might be butt up against a magazine deadline. So you were now, mind you, this is before computers. This is on the Smith Corona Selectric, baby, and God forbid you're making typos, because it's not a pretty sight. Today, doing this on a laptop or a PC, a breeze. Back then, we didn't have that chance. I mean, it wasn't there. The technology didn't come into play till maybe 87, 88.
Did you, in terms of the getting the guys to, get into character and you tape recorded it? Did you have some that you particularly enjoyed when you interviewed them?
Roddy Piper, Paul Orndorff, Sergeant Slaughter. Sarge would go into character in a heartbeat. Sarge is one of my best friends still to this day from the business. Actually, we were just communicating the other day. Piper was a gracious and a gentleman. Orndorff could get into character in a heartbeat. I didn't have the opportunity to work with the Grand Wizard that long. He had passed away. I only knew the Grand Wizard, Ernie Roth, a couple months. But boy, he could get into character as well, too. Albano could get into character. Blassie could get into character. I would have to pull them off to the side so we weren't interfering with television taping, because these guys could get a little bit loud in that old egg hall, where the sound traveled. They were really, really good to deal with, and they were a lot of fun. Oh my God. And they would help you. And I tried to get them verbatim as much as possible, because they had such unique ways of saying things, and their style. I mean, they perfected their craft all these years.
Wow, yeah. Talk about legends there. Did you ever have any talent, that you worked with come back to you and say that they were unhappy with the way that you put their piece together or covered them in the magazine?
No, no. They were very, if they made the magazine, they were all extremely happy. And they were used to, stuff that wasn't true in the magazine anyways, because it was the creativity of Pro Wrestling Illustrated that we're,
Mhm.
we're doing these crazy stories. And I'm not knocking these guys. I mean, some of the stuff was brilliant that they came up with, but uh, I don't know what they were smoking or what they were drinking, but boy, they sure came up with some good stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think they interviewed. They did many interviews per se. They were free form. I had a fan send a question in asking about, we all remember, even from the beginning of the publication, those iconic covers that you'd walk by a newsstand as a kid, and you'd have to stop and look and pick it up, check it out, buy it. How did you decide who went on the cover, and was that something that Vince Jr. had a hand in directing?
Steve was wonderful. Steve would really got good at shooting live shows, and he also had brought the equipment along to do stills as well too. Uh, he would come down to maybe 4 or 5 different shots, and it was always Vince that had final approval on what the magazine cover was going to be, uh, and rightfully so. It's his ballywick, it's his name on it. It's his vision. And so we just acquiesced and, okay, whatever you need, Vince. And Vince was always amazed on the photography that Steve Taylor did. I mean, it was tremendous in those early years. Um, Steve transitioned later on, and they brought Tom Buchanan in, and Tom was phenomenal as well too. Tom, Steve, and I worked at the same newspaper here in Auburn, New York. Believe it or not, I mean, it was just amazing, and the talent that came out of here uh, in terms of pro wrestling. But it was always Vince who made that final decision on that. I mean, Steve was meticulous with his stuff. He took thousands of photos a month, um, but he was really really good at it.
Hmm. Absolutely. After about a year, you transitioned from the magazine to merchandising, marketing. Uh, what prompted you to make that shift? And did it present to you another level of challenge, given the fact that which we'll talk about in a minute, just how crucial both of those business lines were to the national expansion of the WWF?
Um, it was a decision basically made by the McMahons that they wanted to make a change, and I respect that. I mean, it's your publication, mind you. After doing this for quite a few months, the grind on working the magazine, there's a little bit of burnout at that point. Vince is a workaholic. When they say that he works 16, 18, 20 hours a day, yeah, he expected his people to do the same thing. The problem was he wasn't paying us 16, 18 hours a day. Uh, and so after a while, you just became numb to it. So, when they were moving me out, and here's the opportunity to go over into marketing and merchandising, I welcomed that opportunity because, yeah, I could still go on the road. Yeah, we were putting out product, and better yet, you know what? It was a different type of creativity on making money for the World Wrestling Federation and getting the product in and getting the product into the venues and finding out what was selling in what town and what wasn't, and what impact did it have when a wrestler was on a card and you had their merch there, as opposed to the wrestler not being there and you have their merch there, and what the impact was at that point. Uh, we still had the 30,000 magazine monthly programs, and if we had any returns, we were recycling them for a different show, sending them out. We could have magazines programs left from Madison Square Garden, and we're sending them off to Boston 2 days later. So I mean, it was just it was a big challenge, and the money that was being generated was tremendous. We had challenges though getting inventory and keeping inventory in stock as well too, and juggling between mail order, live venue. And it's just like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul sometimes. And like, when are we going to get this stuff in? And I think some of the suppliers were getting a little greedy as well too, because the price of T-shirts were going up all of a sudden. Especially the red and the yellow ones. Coincidence? Nah, no coincidence.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you were instrumental in having Hogan brought in and during the time switched over to the merch. Can you talk about how much of a role Hogan specific products, merchandising, imaging played in getting the WWF to the next level?
Oh, it's huge. Without Hulk Hogan, it doesn't happen. The red T-shirts, the yellow T-shirts, the headbands. We had wristbands at one time as well too. The posters, the Hulk Hogan foam fingers. Everything was huge at that point. Hulk Hogan was up here in terms of merch sales. Everybody was down here. Without him, we're not. He stirred the drink. He was the man, and he knew it. But then again, we were also smart enough to place our merchandise in spots where our TV would pick up on it, our cameras would pick up on it. And then Vince would then segue into the magazine ad. Or Vince was always good about the magazine and referencing things to the magazine. Everything was done methodically. Everything was done with a plan and a purpose. That was the beauty of working for the WWF at that point. You were there to make as much money as you possibly could. Now, you could only go so far if you had the merchandise. If you don't, I'm not doing the wine and water trick where making any biblical thing at that point. I got to have it, or I can't make the money for you guys. It's just that simple. And then you're balancing getting shipments in and getting it inventoried and getting it orders processed and sent out the door. And then anything that they saw Hulk wearing on TV, God, orders were flying in at that point. Then we got into the LGN toys and the toy rings, and that became a huge seller as well too. And guys were just, we were having all kinds of talent. Hulk was our biggest seller with anything, and biggest box office. Before he left, Slaughter was up there very close. So was Roddy Piper. Piper was huge. I mean, Ricky Steamboat came in, but Randy Savage. Just think about the talent that we had at that point. Guys like Jimmy Snuka and Don Morocco were cast aside. Ivan Koloff, the former champion, pushed aside. This was Cowboy Bob Orton was in now. Paul Orndorff was in. This was a whole new, exciting time of the wrestling business. And it was just phenomenal to be part of it. We all felt like rock stars. And when we went into towns and people knew that we were in the wrestling business, I don't care if you swept the floors, you were treated like a god. I mean, it's like, this was better than being with Barnum and Bailey by any stretch of the imagination. It was just an amazing time. I mean, it was a wild and woolly 80s on top of it. And thank God I was single at the time.
Got another fan question. A lot of old school fans remember the update segment with Mean Gene, and it used to start off with from the pages of the World Wrestling Federation magazine. Its update with Gene Okerlund. A fan wanted to know about your interactions with the great Mean Gene, right up there in the conversation as one of the greatest of all time.
Those segments happened after my tenure. Uh, what we were doing at that point, what people don't remember, forget, is Gene was doing we were doing the 900 telephone numbers, come in and listen to a wrestler. So Gene was doing the intro on those as well too. But met Gene a few times. Great guy, tremendous talent. I mean, brilliant man, a funny guy, but he understood it as well too, and that was part of the plan to integrate everything into the business, and give every part of the business its proper due. I mean, if you think about it, there's not many businesses that do that. Think about the pro sports business. Did they really do it like that? No. But then again, Vince had, his own TV show, and he ran it the way he wanted. He saw fit with it, and I hate to use the word manipulate the people, but boy, sure as hell he did. I mean, he spoon-fed the stuff to them, and they were gobbling it up.
Mm-hmm. In terms of you started in '83, you were there before. Correct me if I'm wrong. The first WrestleMania, and then WrestleMania 2, WrestleMania 3. Can you talk about what your duties were around WrestleMania specifically? I know that the history books have it that WrestleMania 1 was pretty much leveraged, and if it wasn't a success, it would have been we'd still probably have a regional WWF to this day. But what was the atmosphere like in the company leading up to that, and then your subsequent work with those classic events?
A lot of groundwork was done prior to WrestleMania 1. We had the rock and wrestling connection with MTV, so that connection started at that point. We were becoming more and more mainstream at that point. Mr. T and Hulk Hogan were on Saturday Night Live the night before WrestleMania 1. You're leveraging, bringing in Liberace and Billy Martin and Muhammad Ali. How could it not succeed? You had all these venues doing closed circuit TV, and we're sending merchandise to all these places, and people are paying a good buck to sit in seats in an arena to watch a big screen and watch WrestleMania coming from New York City.
Me included.
I think we even had back then, closed circuit TV on some of these cable systems that were charging an arm and a leg at that. I think they were $100 for the show or something like that. So it was highly leveraged, but it was going to be a success no matter what. And Bob McMullen, who was the CFO at that time, has stated in the last few years that the myth that the business was going to stay as a regional business, untrue.
Wow.
It was going to be a success no matter what. So
interesting.
It was highly, and Bob knew all the numbers. He kept all the books. So that myth is busted at that point. WrestleMania 2, if you look at the three venues, the Nassau Coliseum, the Rosemont Horizon, and the LA Sports Arena, okay, they drew probably close to 60,000 between the three venues, but I'm in the Nassau Coliseum, and it's great when you have the live wrestling at the Nassau Coliseum, but when they go to the Rosemont Horizon and later to Los Angeles, you just feel that you're sitting in a theater. And a little bit of the oomph was lost at that point. And, that concept has only been done once and never repeated. And so they did get well with that as well, too. WrestleMania 2. But WrestleMania 3, they did their homework. Back in August of 86, there was a big show at the CNE in Toronto where they drew 65,000 people.
The big event.
Exactly. And Hulk was on that card.
I was there.
I was there too. And that set the precedent. Like, can we get into big venues like the Pontiac Silverdome? And the Silverdome was a perfect location because you could draw from Ontario, you could draw from Toronto, you could draw from the Midwest. You could get on a plane in New York and be in Detroit in an hour. So you had the opportunity to do big numbers there. And whether it was 78,000 or 93,000, whatever that number was, all I know was that damn building was packed to the rafters with people. There weren't any empty seats anywhere. And the bootleggers outside the Pontiac Silverdome were having a field day prior to the show. And once everybody emptied in, I had about a dozen of them arrested out in the parking lot. Bootleggers were a big problem back then. The knockoff merchandise, these guys were making a good living off of that. Mind you, we were doing well with our inside the buildings. Hell, at WrestleMania 3, we did $550,000 for that show and gross sales. Today's dollars, that's $1.65 million. Not too shabby. And so, we for WrestleMania 3, we virtually emptied out the entire warehouse and sent it to Detroit. Mind you, we were moving our warehouse at that time period as well, too. So we wanted to sell as much, and if anything came back, we didn't have to inventory and put it back on the shelves in the new location. So it was another one of those things that were perfectly done and perfectly planned, and the strategy was wonderful at that point. So there were some big numbers that were going on at that point. I remember Vince, always saying, don't talk to the boys about the merchandising. Don't give them an idea how much is coming in, because Vince is then going to deal with these guys and negotiate with them. And you can easily get in trouble by saying something innocently. Mm-hmm. And the boys were really good at poking around for information. Mm-hmm. And so, you really, really had to be careful.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you a question along those lines in a minute, which has made the news the past couple of weeks with Kevin Nash. But Man in Black is asking, what about working, which I was going to ask you with Bobby Heenan? How was he to work with from your perspective?
A genius. Bobby Heenan was a tremendous talent. You got to remember, he was a wrestler. He was also a wrestling manager, wrestling announcer. He was a triple threat. He could do it all. He was just, a lot of this stuff was off the cuff. The man is spontaneous. He and Gorilla Monsoon had quite the chemistry together. People ask me, if it wasn't for the Grand Wizard passing away, would Heenan have been brought in? And would he have had as much success? And I thought about that, and I said, he probably was going to be brought in, and he was going to still have that success. Mind you, at that point, Wiz and Freddie and Lou, they're getting a little bit older in age. And they were part of the old guard, with the connections to the 60s and the 70s. This was the 80s and going forward. So you had Bobby Heenan coming in. He acted younger. He was just a brilliant man and a fun guy to be around. I'm very fortunate to have known Bobby Heenan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What a legend. Number one manager of all time, in my opinion. Ibzan is asking, when was the last time you saw Vince? Was he approachable?
1994 was the last time I saw Vince. It was a house show in Syracuse, New York. One of my best friends and the gentleman who stood up in my wedding was the late great referee Tim White.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew Timmy was going to be in town. We had been in contact, and he says, "Come to the show." I said, "No." I said, "Are you guys staying afterwards?" He goes, "Yeah, we'll be at the Hotel Syracuse." Said, "I'll meet you there." And so I go up the stairway to the Hotel Syracuse, and the first person I run into is Vince McMahon. And that was like 7 years. This was right before the drug trials, the steroid trial. And Vince came up to me and said, "Hey, big guy, give me a big hug." "Okay, Vince, I will." And then we sat down, and I said my piece and made my peace with Vince at that point as well. And I remember Tim going, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." And a lot of the boys came up to me, and my good friend Howard Finkel, gave me a big hug as well too. And a lot of the boys who I didn't know came up and shook hands with me, and I complimented him. I enjoy your work. I mean, Ted DiBiase, that's when he was really going as the $1 Million Man. I said, "Man, I love your work." My wife doesn't, but I do. But I mean, it was just one of the. And Shane McMahon was there. Shane worked for me at one time. Shane was there, and it was just a good time to see these guys. I've had more contact in the last 15 years with Linda McMahon than I did with Vince. Vince is like, trying to get to Hulk Hogan. I mean, he's got a lot of layers, and it's just like, if Vince wants to get a hold of me, he'll find a way to. And for me to try to reach him, good luck.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Shane. A lot of folks that I've had the fortunate circumstance to interview really put Shane over as a great guy. You mentioned that he worked with you for a bit. What was your experience like with Shane O'Mac?
Vince gave us free reign to beat the hell out of him and work him like a dog. And we did. He said, "Don't cut my kid any slack," because he's the boss's son. And we never did. So, I mean, we worked him hard, and he grew an appreciation for the business as well, too. I think he always had in the back of his head he was going to be the heir apparent. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. I don't know the politics behind it. I don't know the backstories of it. I just feel that it's kind of a shame. But then again, Stephanie's no pushover as well, too. And so, and maybe Vince says, instead of my kids fighting it, none of them will get it. So it's just the way it is. But Shane wanted to please his dad to no end. It's just one of those things that, you're just trying so hard to please and please and please. And I don't know if Vince recognized that, appreciated that. But I give Shane a lot of credit for it. I really do. I mean, some of the bumps that he took wanting to become one of the boys, and Vince as well. I mean, when Vince became Mr. McMahon, that was the turning point of the business after the steroid trial, and the business was down, and he resurrected the business at that point. That and bringing having Steve Austin, but also letting these guys move on and get signed. If you think about it, going over to Crockett and getting these guys signed for one last big payday. Vince, yeah, go ahead, go make your money. This is gonna help put these guys out of business. And basically, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. They had too much payroll.
Mm-hmm.
Too much payroll and not enough shows.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I was going to ask you about this topic, but a fan, Man in Black, again's asking, what about Andre the Giant? Any stories? But I was going to please deviate from this focus, but I was going to ask you about the time of WrestleMania 3. Andre was in, declining, health. He was irritable at times, understandably so. Not knocking him for that, but any Andre stories in general, or specifically around that period of time when that entire main event, so the mythology goes anyway, it was up in the air as to whether or not he'd do business for Hogan, or at least that's what some have said.
Well, that's part of the myth and the mystery. Was Andre going to do business with him? Yeah, he was going to do business with him. Of course he was. Andre was a very dear friend. The first 2 years in the business, you had to earn Andre's respect, and Andre didn't like me very much. And we had a conversation once, and people didn't realize that he had a young daughter. I did, and I asked him about it. And we were talking about it, and after that point, he took a liking to me, and wonderful guy. But WrestleMania, he's in our warehouse about 3 weeks before WrestleMania 3, in terrible pain. We had the new magazine for WrestleMania 3. He and Hogan on the cover.
Yep.
I said, Andre, would you autograph this for me? And he said, boss, I'll do it anytime you want. So I have an autographed copy of Andre the Giant signing that WrestleMania 3 magazine 3 weeks before the show.
Nice.
After I left the business, and Tim White was his handler. Tim had a boxing background, could handle himself very, very well. He knew how to take care of people who drank maybe too much, and that fit into the bill of Andre. And they got along famously. He took Andre around everywhere. You have to understand, with wrestlers at that point, especially Andre, there were guys who wanted to pick a fight with wrestlers and Andre the Giant. So Tim was there to buffer it. The biggest, easiest lawsuit to get is get slugged by a professional wrestler. Whether you started it or not, wrestler lays a hand on you, lawsuit, they're going to settle with you, you're going to make some good money. So they didn't want that situation with Andre. Plus, he knew he was getting bigger. He could have had the surgery to stop his growth, but he didn't want to. He wanted his legacy to be the big man and the giant of wrestling. So after I left the business, I hooked up with Tim White and Andre in Buffalo, New York, after the show at the Memorial Auditorium. And we went to the Hilton nearby, and we're in the bar, and a couple of guys tried to bum rush towards Andre. And Tim just put up his hands and said, not tonight, fellas, not tonight, not tomorrow night, not never. And I just looked at Tim and I said, how did you know that? He goes, I can feel it in the floor. He goes, it happens so often. You learn to expect it. So, but Andre and I and my fiance, my wife now, we're sitting there having drinks. Now you got to imagine Andre with a cocktail drink in his hand, or a beer bottle, looks like a shot glass. And we started talking about our wedding, because we were getting married 5 or 6 months down the road. And Andre stopped and he goes, can I come to your wedding? Andre, of course, man. When is it? May 14th. Darn, I'm booked for Hartford that night. How he knew 5 months in advance where he was going to be was beyond me. And I remember him asking my wife, what color are your bridesmaids' gowns? It's just like, I didn't know he had that type of soft side in him to be asking questions like that. And he and my wife hit it off extremely well. And Andre was, I'll never forget it. The day that he passed away, for some reason, I couldn't sleep. And I went down to our basement and I turned on the radio, and I just happened to tune into a New York City station. And I found out, I heard that Andre passed away, and I cried like a baby. And still to this day, it's very emotional to me, because he was a special person in my life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Yeah, he really, really was. I mean, a good-hearted man. I mean, when I first met Andre, uh, and I walked into the locker room, and he's playing cards with Arnold Skoland and a couple other guys beforehand, and I wasn't there to drop anything off. You're welcome into the dressing room to drop anything off. I just wandered in there to see what was going on, and Andre yelled at me, "Get out, get out!" I thought he was joking around with me. Then he got up and he started charging at me, and I said, "Oh, he mean business." I'm sorry, boss. I got to go. I'm sorry I offended you. So, uh, I mean, we hit it off on the wrong foot to begin with, but that at the end we were great friends.
Mm-hmm. Ibzan always asks about the agents, and he wants to know how they were towards you, talking about Pat, Rene Goulet, Tony Gurria, and Lanza.
Goulet was fine. Gurria was a good guy. Lanza I didn't have too much contact with. Strongbow was an asshole. Arnold Skolin was a great guy. Uh, Back then, doing some agent work was Gorilla Monsoon. Bobby Morello was great. People don't realize he was still a part owner, and had an active interest in the business. So, I think he was a little skeptical when Vince was taking over and things were changing quickly. And but he got on board with it, and it just like, um, they were the agents buying. Everybody was good except for Strongbow.
Mm-hmm.
First class asshole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that before. In terms of Ibzan's got another question about. We've talked about Hulk Hogan being the cash cow that he was, but what was your relationship like with him backstage, outside of the ring, that sort of thing? Were you close?
I wouldn't say close, but we weren't total strangers. Um, he was moving at a fast pace, and business was taking off, and he and Vince were very attached at the hip and coming up with different ideas and where they were going to take this business and the different angles. Terry was always gracious, always good to me. Um, Always got along with Hulk. Never had a cross moment with him in any way, shape, or form. But with some of these guys, you knew your place, and you kept that distance, and you were respectful of that. And by and large, it works out well that way. You get too close to some of these guys, things can happen, things can change. Um, and in a lot of ways, it may not turn out well,
Mm-hmm.
or you get dragged into something that you shouldn't.
Yeah, understood. You mentioned about the talent. You being told not to talk about merch sales with the talent, and this has been within the last couple of weeks. I don't know whether you caught it or not, but Kevin Nash posted some comments that he felt that the royalty checks, are starting to go down, have gone down under the new THQ consortium, and I wanted to know, and the fan was asking too, with aside from Hogan, but the guys that you would see in the original or one of the original T-shirt color ads, the Killer Bees, Don Morocco, Jake the Snake, the guys that had the T-shirts and perhaps some other items. How were they cut into the percentages for those sales, and was that ever a point of contention from your perspective?
On my end, I never knew what the percentages were or how they were cut in. That was strictly something from the main office. That was a business deal between Vince, the talent, the CFO, maybe Linda McMahon. Um, I couldn't tell you who was making what a bigger percentage or how much they were making in any way, shape, or form. Um, it just wasn't my place and wasn't my business, and that's fine. I didn't need to know. what Vince was concerned about is don't talk about gross numbers. What did we do for merch sales at a particular show? Because these guys are really good at spinning it back the other way and use it in negotiations. And then the question is, where did you hear this from? And then you get dragged into the conversation, and then you get into big trouble. So it was always better just to keep your mouth shut and play stupid and basically kayfabe them as well too. It's just like I don't know, they're still working on the numbers, and just take, you knew what the numbers were, because I had to report to other people with the numbers, but I would never say it publicly to people.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've got time for one more live fan question. One of my favorites, Man in Black again, is asking, what about Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth? You talked about the company getting a real jolt when he came in. Did you have any interaction with them during your tenure there, following their introduction?
Very little with Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. When Macho Man came on, and he became the heir apparent to Jimmy Snuka, he was the flyer off the top rope. When he first appeared at Madison Square Garden, he did some of his dives. It was tremendous. The gasps from the crowd, they grew on him rather quickly. They appreciated him and welcomed him with open arms. Miss Elizabeth, how could you not enjoy Miss Elizabeth? She was one attractive lady. You have to understand, she didn't talk much. She was there for the look. But my understanding and some of the guys saying, Randy was very protective of Elizabeth because he knows the wrestling business and what guys will do and how distractions can occur and how marriages can get busted up because of this.
Makes sense. Looking back, we've talked about some of the real advancement in pro wrestling merchandising that you were a key component of, especially compared to say Crockett that barely had anything at all. But can you think of any missed opportunities in terms of merchandising, some golden ideas that just never came to fruition that you were bullish on when they were in the developmental stage and they just petered out?
I think the biggest thing is we didn't have the budget for inventory, and I think we left a lot of money on the table. You have to understand something. Because of the inventory levels and balancing things between mail order and live shows, and depending on where the shows are, if you have Hulk on the main as a top draw at a particular town, or show Hulk is on a run for 4 or 5 days, there goes your inventory. So the problem was that sometimes we wouldn't get mail orders out for 5-6 weeks because we didn't have the product. That's where I think we missed the opportunity because financially we didn't have it at that point. And we could turn it and make money. God knows we made money, but we kept it also family-friendly prices. I mean, WrestleMania t-shirts for WrestleMania 3, $20. Mind you, what was minimum wage was what, $3.35 at that point? But at $20, you look at that now, that's nothing. You do that, you go to a rock show right now, what is it, $50, $60 for a t-shirt?
Plus. Yeah.
So, I mean, and then if they come out with a hockey jersey, then you're well over 100 at that point. So, and it's just the way it is. I mean, even the NHL and NFL, I mean, go buy merchandise at Highmark Stadium or Maple Leaf Gardens or any of the other places, and you're paying well above. And people got money in their pockets, and they're going to spend. I mean, we did well in our era. I mean, that's 40 years ago. Today, wow, a great opportunity. I don't know what they're doing in terms of merchandising in today's with today's business model with the WWF. I don't know. Everything, it's targeted for a TV and the big shows and going overseas, and that's fine. We were going overseas as well too, Qatar, Bahrain, um, back in the '80s, and that was even stranger and goofier and turmoil in the Middle East. So I remember I had to get a WWF program for one of the Middle Eastern countries. You had to go see some guy in a translator in New York City just for an 8 by 10 sheet to put it in Farsi. And he charged us $2,000 to do it back then. Oh,
Wow.
yeah. I mean,
Wow.
but you did it. I
Mhm.
mean, and who knows what they charge for merchandise out in the Middle East? Probably triple, quadruple the prices. And they
Mhm.
sold out everything at that point. It was a hot commodity.
Mhm. So, coming on the heels of WrestleMania 3, one of the most successful mainstream events of all time, especially in that era, you you obviously were very um, successful in your job. What happened? How did you depart the company? What were those circumstances?
Well, at that point, I was engaged to my wife. She was living up here in Auburn, New York. I'm living in Westport, Connecticut at that time. Am I going to get married and move her down to this expensive area? How much will I be on the road? Will my private life and my marriage life suffer, or do I want to just pack it in and move back to upstate New York? Get married, have a family, and try to live happily ever after. And I basically shot my mouth off too many times of that. I'm probably going to leave. I'm probably going to leave. Probably, and I cried wolf one too many times, and they called me out on it. It's just like, okay, um, they were bringing in a new warehouse manager on top of it, and that's fine. And so it was just a great time to leave at that point. I got my severance and moved on, and no regrets in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I've always said I'm very, very fortunate in where I was at that time. I mean, I always say it's a footnote in pro wrestling history, but boy, it was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So to to close, what advice would you give for say there's a young upstart out there who has a media background or journalism or what have you. You really went out and made this happen for yourself, and have got all these great memories as a result. What advice would you give to somebody looking to work for and again, it's different because it's almost as you pointed out numerous times, it's a TV company now. But if their dream was to work for WWE, what piece of advice would you give them based on your experience?
Have a thick skin, first of all. Number two, realize that you're in the entertainment business. You're not in the sport business. This is a completely different cat that you'll ever experience in your life. Um, your friends aren't necessarily your friends. Uh, Keep your head on a swivel. Do a lot of listening as opposed to talking. Absorb as much as possible, and expect to have a shelf life. You don't know when that expiration date is. You're the last one to know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Enjoy the ride. Have fun with it. Um, and just take it from there. I mean, uh, it was a fun business and entertainment business. I learned a lot in it. Um, did I have knives thrown in my back? Yeah, it happened. But and you're near the big market in New York City, expect that. I mean, it's a highly competitive area, and people would die to have your job.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've really got some amazing experiences to look back on, and it was a positive. But what a time to be in that company. Ed, I wanted to ask you: do you have any social media presence that you'd like the fans to know about, or where could they perhaps reach out to you, ask questions, or any way that the fans could keep up with your comings and goings, so to speak?
Just look me up on Facebook, Ed Helsinki. I'm also on X. I'm also on Blue Sky as well too, um, Instagram as well too. So I mean, I always welcome that. There, after I do one of these podcasts, I get quite a few requests as well too. I only ask people like, "Hey, drop me a note on Messenger," so I have an idea who you are, as opposed to somebody who you're not. There's a lot of creepy people out here in the world, especially on social media.
Absolutely. Well, Ed, I want to thank you once again for coming on the Cheap Heat Productions podcast today. Absolutely fascinating stuff. I really enjoyed it. I know the fans will too. So we'll definitely make sure that they know how to get a hold of you and take it from there. Thanks again.
Hey, if you want to do this again sometime, just let me know. I'd be happy to.
Awesome. Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the Cheap Heat Productions podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cheap Heat Productions. Don't forget to hit the notification button, and you won't miss